Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Ché Aimee Dorval called Between the Walls and the Window. So about 3 years ago, around this time, I reviewed the self-titled debut album from Casualties of Cool, yet another side project of extreme metal artist Devin Townsend. And while I could talk a fair bit about how metal artists are making a shift towards country, to this day, Casualties of Cool remains unlike anything I have ever covered on my show. The sinuous, melodic grooves rooted in old-fashioned progressions, yet decidedly new, paired with a mix as atmospheric and textured as any Devin Townsend project record beforehand, a record playing more with subtle abstractions and ghostly metaphor than its direct narrative, which involves space travel and a sentient moon, because of course it does. It was near impossible to properly classify. Post-country, atmospheric country, it was a sound that confounded most indie country fans and metalheads alike. And yet, I would posit that anyone who has actually heard that album would testify it is easily one of the best of the decade. So okay, why mention any of this? Well, for as much as Devin Townsend shaped the sound and the production, he did have one other major collaborator, fellow Canadian Ché Aimee Dorval. Now, she's been active in the underground for the past decade, her sound pulling on similar country atmospherics to Casualties of Cool, but also drawing on soul and blues and rock to anchor her hypnotic and sultry melodic grooves and pretty sharp writing. She put out a record in 2009 and an EP in late 2014, and thanks to Pledge Music, she was able to put together another full-length album for this year that's bound to get slept on by pretty much everybody. Well, I'm not everybody, and I'm not going to stand for that, so I want to cover Between the Walls and the Window. What'd I find here? Well, it's tough for me to say, honestly. I've been steadily listening to this project pretty much non-stop since it dropped, and while I am certain it's pretty damn good, I keep hesitating in calling it great, and yeah, that bugs me. Part of this comes to the feeling that this album really doesn't misfire, but something isn't quite clicking as strongly as it did on, say, Casualties of Cool, and it's been a real bit of a struggle to pinpoint what that actually is, because I can't really call this great as much as I want to. Now, one thing I can guarantee that it's not is Ché Aimee Dorval herself. And let's make this abundantly clear. If there is any one reason to listen to this record, it's her. I loved her voice on Casualties of Cool, and she's as expressive, if not more so here with her own material, and both the poise to ease back when she needs to, and a clear, belting tone that's as strident or soulful as any that you will hear this year. As a singer, she's an absolute powerhouse, who can bring in real, raw subtleties of emotion and control to her delivery, and I cannot praise her enough. And you know what? I really do like a lot of her writing and the lyrics here too, but let's get one thing established. This record is bleak. We'll talk about this more when we get into the production, but if you're looking for a record with writing as harrowing and depressing as any doom metal album that would come out this year, Dorval delivers. And again, so much of this is dependent upon the subtleties in her delivery and word choice. This is very much of a subtle bleakness that comes through. You get the sense that this is a very deliberate project and its thorough excavation of details and situations. But it starts off seriously melancholic and is consistent within that tone for the entire runtime, with maybe the closest thing to a bright spot being the hopeful questions behind Holding In, and honestly that's probably the weakest song on the album. But beyond that, the album starts off with the paralyzing fear of afraid, is violently drowned out and repressed unburied, subjected to painful regret in the face of a friend's loss and I should have worried, and then faces the numb expectation of attack upon it on low. It's a record where you can have an increasingly vivid slice of self-criticism on the art of dying, where after all of its increasingly brutal retrospection about her behavior in a relationship, we get the line, "I breathe because I have not yet mastered the art of dying." Jesus, I know emo songwriters that would give anything for lines both that poetic and measured and yet that dark. But it's also important to stress there aren't notes of immaturity or a pop approach in order to cultivate an audience in that lane. The writing is too methodical, the delivery is way too intense, and tension here is also a major element. The relationship on Erupt the Quietus is on the verge of breaking down, but neither partner can really cross that breach. And that's before you get the spoken word resignation that comes behind the failed relationship portrait on I Know, A Broken Heart. It's almost too real in some of these songs. So okay, It's a pretty dark album if you can't tell, and the slower tempos and the deliberate word choice can make the record feel long. It's only 8 tracks at 35 minutes, but if you're in the right mood, it can feel twice that length, and that's not really a problem. But the writing in the delivery, it's so potent. Why am I not gripped by this more? Well, honestly, I think some of that might come down to the instrumentation and the production, and more of the latter than the former here. Unlike Casualties of Cool, this is a fair few steps away from country towards more alternative rock, indie folk, and even some post-rock elements in the liquid, simmering tones and some of the atmosphere. But there's a part of me that feels that this would all be a fair bit better fit for a genre like, say, doom metal that could really crank up the melancholy and bleakness that matched Dorval's impassioned delivery, similar to what Chelsea Wolfe is doing right now on albums like Abyss or His Spun. Now, I'm not denying there is subtlety and a fair bit of smolder here. The tolling simmer and grinding darkness behind a frame that chugs into some of the background of Erupt the Quietus, the echoing smoky guitar tones swelling throughout the reverb on I Should Have Noticed, even the gentler touches on I Know, A Broken Heart, and especially Art of Dying. That song is really damn good. But for as potent as all these tones are, as much as I like them, they don't quite pick up the level of texture or bite or atmosphere to really match the intensity of the content or vocals. And if you want to know part of the reason for that, you can see the production credits from Bob Rock and Walk Away. Now, he's not the only producer here. Sean F. Cole handles 5 of the 8 songs while Rock handled 3, but Bob Rock's bad reputation of nullifying any edge that he tries to bring in, it's all the more present here, where there are some rougher tones on Erupt the Quietus and Holding In and Low, but they feel smothered by drums that are a little bit too loud, or a little too much reverb covering it up. Now, part of this, I don't know if Dorval could have avoided the comparison. Devin Townsend is such a damn great producer that anybody after him is gonna sound like a step down, especially when it comes to cultivating any sense of atmosphere. But you know what? I can't move past the feeling that this record feels a little bit too smooth and a little too controlled in its production, not quite matching all the bleakness of the content that does feel more raw. And when the atmosphere isn't quite all the way there, an album that could suck you in for the long haul in that darkness can start to fade a little bit into the background, and that's not really a good sign. And look, I really want to love this record, and for significant chunks of it, I really do. The writing is sharp and cutting, Dorval is a force to be reckoned with as a singer, and when the melodies and hooks do stick with you, they are really damn good. But this record needs to feel thicker and heavier, or maybe a little bit more enveloping in its production to really pull me in here to match that content. And it might be a shade too conventional there for its own good, for lack of better words. Now, I'll admit, it's probably going to be a fair bit more accessible this way, and I can see a lot of first-time listeners enraptured by this record. But for me, didn't quite get there. As such, I'm giving it an extremely strong 7 out of 10, absolutely a recommendation. I'd love to support fellow Canadians in independent music right now, and Ché Aimee Dorval does have real star power going forward. I can see her having a masterpiece in her in somewhere in the future. Now for me, this doesn't quite get there yet, but she's definitely damn close. You're gonna want to check this out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I know a lot of you guys probably haven't heard of Ché Aimee Dorval, but trust me, you guys are gonna want to get this record. It is something special. Even if it didn't quite hit greatness for me, it is so close to it. But hey, if you want to buy the record, links in the description below, and I got the poll up there for those of you who did hear it. I'm curious where you fall on it, given that, again, this sort of indie music, it's a little bit off the beaten path, it's a little intense, and you start looking into the details. I'm curious how much you guys fall on it. Beyond that, anything else I may be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process or help support this channel, link to my Patreon is right over there. Where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. Coming up on the end of the year, not a lot of spaces left for me to cover records. I'm getting through as much as I can, I promise. And if you're asking about year-end lists, they come in the last 2 weeks of the year. You guys all know that. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.